no introduction, but I've got to say this. He's been with Panola College for, I guess, almost 30 years, if I'm not...
40. 1970.
Okay, and...
I was 5 when I came.
Oh, my Lord. He's been a recipient of Piper Professorship Award in 2000, and he has written many, many books and articles, and he had been on television, I think History Channel, Discovery Channel, A&E, and all that. Ladies and gentlemen, I present Bill O'Neill.
Thank you, Zini. It's a privilege indeed to present the first lunchbox lecture of this new school year. My thanks to the library staff for the arrangements. And I want to thank the library publicly for the help that you've given me with this book as well as others that I've done. I'm especially grateful for the incredible detective work of our interlibrary loan specialist, Sherry Baker, who just comes up with the greatest things on all these projects I do. Of course, I'm grateful for your presence. I thank you all for coming. This book has gotten off to an exciting start. As you'll see, it is a Wild West soap opera. I've mentioned that to some of you. Fittingly, therefore, we introduced it last month at the annual meeting of the Wild West History Association. This was held in Ruidoso, New Mexico. Next day we had a book signing in West Texas, and the book store, admittedly only 4 years old, but they said it was the best day that they had ever had. And this coming Friday I'll be in Fort Worth to tape a TV interview about it. So what's this book all about? All right, adultery, murder, street shootouts, the shotgun assassination of a judge, the so-called suicide of one of those assassins while in custody, the removal of trial documents from West Texas courthouses, gunplay by famed Texas Ranger Frank Hamer. If some of you are not familiar with him, he's a guy who later in his career chased down Bonnie and Clyde, and overall a homicidal struggle between two pioneer ranching families. All of this and a good deal more make up the turbulent ingredients of the last old-fashioned blood feud in Texas. Now, I wrote a book about the first blood feud in Texas just a few years ago. That was the Regulator-Moderator War that happened right around here in Panola, Shelby, and Harrison counties. 31 men were killed, including a judge in that one too. And all kinds of feuds followed in Texas throughout the 1800s, more in Texas than in any other state. But by the 20th century, although there were still occasional gunfights in Texas here and there, the old sustained feuds seemed to be a thing of the 19th century past. Listen, by the 20th century in Texas, by the turn of the century, we had toothpaste in a tube here. We had Coca-Cola and hot dogs, and you may not know, but invented in Texas. Dr. Pepper in Waco. Hamburgers invented in Athens. There were telephones and ice cream parlors and a growing number of automobiles, but even in the second decade of the 20th century, the old feuding instincts were not very far below the surface in West Texas. West Texans still bristled with the violent impulses of the frontiersmen who had settled this harsh region just one generation earlier. There were two West Texas pioneer ranching patriarchs in this story. Billy Johnson was still a teenager when, riding point on a trail drive in 1878, he discovered a spring-fed stream in newly organized Scurry County. Billy turned a few cows of his own onto this rugged range. As soon as the trail drive ended, he came back to build a dugout and start claiming land. He was just the age of a bunch of you. He was 18 years of age. Systematically, he would acquire over the years title of 47 contiguous sections over 30,000 acres. He brought a teenage bride soon. Her name was Nanny to his isolated cattle ranch. Billy and Nanny Johnson had 3 sons born in the 1880s, Emmett and Joe and Sidney. Then in 1891 a daughter was born, Gladys. She was Daddy's little girl, and Nanny said that he spoiled her, and he did. Billy Johnson would thrive as a cattle rancher. 10 miles north of Snyder, he built a 16-room stone mansion overlooking the ranch. The view is spectacular, and the mansion's still there. It's empty right now. He founded and became president of the First National Bank of Snyder. He taught all 4 of his children to ride and shoot, and there is a persistent family legend that young Gladys, maybe when she was only about 13, was on a solitary ride across the range, and she was accosted by a couple of men, and she pulled out a gun and shot both of them. And her daddy covered it up, assuming it happened, and he would do that cover-up business again. Meanwhile, and she would use her gun again too, I assure you. Another ranching couple in the meantime, Dave and Laura Bell Sims, drove their cattle herd and their growing family into the rocky, broken rangeland north of the Johnson Ranch in sparsely settled Kent County. Dave Sims was born in 1857 near here in the county right next door to us, Rust. He was born in a covered wagon in transit when his family was moving from Arkansas on into the hill country of Texas. 1888, when Dave, now 31, moved his family out to West Texas, the fourth of his children was born in transit in a covered wagon just like his daddy. Dave Sims built a dugout, later a sprawling frame house. He put together 40 deeded sections, more than 25,000 acres. Dave's oldest son, second child, Ed Sims, grew into a tall, good-looking man. Now, by the time Ed was 21, in 1905, he was smitten with pretty Gladys Johnson from the big ranch 12 miles to the south. But she was only 14 years of age. Now, Gladys and her critical mother, Nanny, often clashed. Ladies, you may remember bumping heads with daughters or with your mamas when you were pretty young, and they did. In the fall of 1904, when she was only 13, Gladys was taken by her parents to a fine school for young ladies, the North Texas Female College and Conservatory of Music in Sherman, 40 miles, about 50 miles north of Dallas. They had an enrollment exceeding 500, and they had 120 pianos to serve the young ladies. Gladys was enrolled several weeks late that fall. Perhaps she was hustled off to Sherman after that shootout, if it happened, with those two men, or maybe her parents wanted to send her away from Ed Sims, a grown man who was courting their little girl. Well, during her Christmas vacation that year at home, Gladys attended 8 or 10 parties, and her relationship with Ed Sims caught fire. She wrote him incessantly during the spring semester, and when she returned to the ranch in June 1905, she had no intention of going back to school in the fall. Gladys was petite and pretty, and she had acquired polish while off at school. I've got a picture of her here in her garb, in her regalia, and there are 60 pictures in the book. And some of them that didn't make the book, I put here. This is a kind of a map of the thing. If any of you are interested, you might want to glance at that later. Ed was in love, and at 21, he was ready to take a bride. Gladys had, I think at the very least, a schoolgirl crush on her broad-shouldered beau. Her mother, Nanny, had been just 16 when she married. It was an age when gals married young. So 14-year-old Gladys, it turned out, was not the first girl to rush into marriage. Ed and Gladys were married on August 31, 1905, uniting two prominent ranching families. Now, I subtitled this book, Romeo and Juliet, West Texas Style. The prologue to Shakespeare's famous tragedy begins this way. Two households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona, where we lay our scene. Well, the scene for the Johnson-Sims conflict was Snyder and Post City, Sweetwater and Claremont, as well as the harsh rangelands of the surrounding countryside. Now, Romeo and Juliet were proclaimed, I bet every one of you have heard this phrase, Shakespeare proclaimed them a pair of star-crossed lovers. Well, that description fit Ed and Gladys just as well as it did Romeo and Juliet. Gladys was 14, I just mentioned. Well, if you recall the play, Juliet was in her 14th year. If Ed had known the calamitous direction his marriage would take, he surely would have echoed these words of Romeo, "Oh, I am fortune's fool." Conflict is necessary to produce tragedy, and Shakespeare could lay one conflict on top of another. Man versus man, man versus himself, man versus nature, man versus society. Well, the Johnson and Sims families and their allies resonated with these conflicts. Shakespeare was a master of subplots, and like Romeo and Juliet, the Johnson-Sims Feud was a maze of subplots. I don't have time to go into them here, but they're in the book. While he was dying in Verona, Mercutio bitterly gasped, "A plague on both your houses." Well, the Capulets and Montagues of Verona suffered the plague of heartbreaking losses, but by play's end, redemption was achieved through the reconciliation of the feuding families. in West Texas, there would be no such prompt reconciliation. And as far as the Johnson family was concerned, over and over, year after year after year, tragedies plagued that family. Anyway, Ed and Gladys made a fine-looking couple. Ed later insisted that for several years he and Gladys, quote, lived together as husband and wife in love and happy quietude. Well, in addition to happy quietude, there was healthy passion. Less than 2 years after their marriage, a daughter, Helen Trix, was born. 2 years later, in 1909, another daughter, Beverly, came along. Now, my wife and I had the privilege of helping Beverly celebrate her 100th birthday last November in San Saba. She is just as sharp as a tack. She is sweet. Her personality, she's vivacious. Great gal. Now, I was helped on this project by a number of first-generation descendants of the Johnson-Sims families, mostly a bunch of aging grandchildren who knew everybody. But Beverly gave me first-person information. You'll see just how first-person it was in just a minute. And it was absolutely invaluable to get to do that. Billy Johnson provided a ranch for Gladys and her new husband. He invested $25,000, an awful lot of money, 100 years ago, in land, cattle, fencing, corrals, and a new house with a big porch all around. Ed brought in a few head of cattle and horses of his own, as well as a section of land donated from the Sims Ranch. Located in newly organized Garza County, this new home of Gladys and Ed was 30 miles west of the Sims Ranch, 40 miles northwest of the Johnson Ranch, 14 miles south of the recently founded county seat, Post City. Now, Post City was created in 1907 as a model community by the wealthy cereal magnate C.W. Post. You know, Post Toasties. At his hotel, Post Toasties were at every breakfast table in the morning. But her new family and home did not bring happiness to Gladys. I mean, think about it. She was a wife at 14 and a mother at 16. At an age when she should have still been in school and attending parties, she was simply unready for the responsibilities of marriage and motherhood. Frustrated and impatient for reasons she didn't comprehend, Gladys at this point was incapable of creating